I hadn't set foot in my hometown in 10 years. 10 years of corner offices, power suits, and missed calls from my mother. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for what I saw when I walked through those airport doors. There she was, holding a handmade sign that read, "Welcome home, you overworked disaster," with glitter and everything. And I lost it. Right there in Terminal C, I started crying like an idiot, because in that moment, I realized I'd been running from the one person who actually knew me. Subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment telling me which city you're watching from, so I know how far this beautiful story is reaching. Thank you so much. The fluorescent lights of JFK Airport had a way of making everyone look like they were dying. I stood at baggage claim, my designer luggage circling endlessly on the conveyor belt, and checked my phone for the 100th time. 6:47 p.m. My mother had texted 3 times asking if I'd landed. I hadn't responded to any of them. My name is Alice, and I'm a senior vice president at Mercer & Associates, a financial firm in Manhattan that basically owns my soul. Or at least, it owned my soul. I'd spent the last decade climbing that corporate ladder with the kind of desperation usually reserved for people fleeing burning buildings. Every promotion felt like proof that leaving my hometown was the right choice. Every bonus was validation that I was meant for something bigger than the small, predictable life waiting for me back in Connecticut. But then my father had a heart attack. Not a massive one, thank God, but enough to scare the hell out of everyone. My mother's voice on the phone had cracked in a way I'd never heard before, and suddenly, all those spreadsheets and client meetings felt impossibly small. So here I was, back in Millbrook, Connecticut, population 8,000, where nothing ever happened and everyone knew everyone else's business. I grabbed my luggage and headed toward the exit, already mentally preparing myself for the small talk with my mother, the questions about my love life, the inevitable comments about how thin I'd gotten. I was so lost in my own head that I almost didn't see her. But then I heard it. A voice that hadn't changed in 10 years, still carrying that exact same laugh that used to make me lose it in chemistry class. "Alice! Alice!" I turned, and there she was. Carter. She was holding a handmade sign that read, "Welcome home, you overworked disaster," in glittery letters, with little drawings of briefcases and stress balls. She was wearing a vintage band t-shirt and jeans with holes in them, her blonde hair pulled into a messy bun, and she had the biggest, most ridiculous smile on her face. And I just broke. I'm not a crier. I'm a woman who negotiates million-dollar deals without flinching. But standing there in Terminal C, looking at my best friend from high school, the girl I'd promised to keep in touch with, the girl I'd ghosted for a decade, I completely fell apart. "Oh my God," Carter said, dropping the sign and rushing toward me. "Oh my God, don't cry. You're going to make me cry, and I just did my makeup." "I'm not crying," I said, wiping my face frantically. "I'm not. I'm just allergic to airports." "You're allergic to airports," Carter repeated, pulling me into a hug that smelled like vanilla and home. "That's the worst lie I've ever heard, and I once believed you when you said you were sick so you could skip the SATs." I laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in what felt like years. "I can't believe you're here. Where else would I be?" Carter pulled back, holding me at arm's length. "Your mom called me 3 weeks ago and told me you were coming home. She was worried you'd try to hide in your hotel room and pretend Millbrook doesn't exist." "I would never—" "You absolutely would," Carter interrupted, grinning. "But that's why I'm here. To make sure you actually experience your hometown like a normal human being instead of a robot who only cares about quarterly earnings." I wanted to argue, but she wasn't wrong. The truth was, I'd been dreading this trip since the moment my mother called. Millbrook represented everything I'd run away from. The small-town expectations, the limited opportunities, the feeling of being trapped in amber while the rest of the world moved forward. But looking at Carter, with her ridiculous sign and her genuine smile, I felt something shift inside me. "Okay," I said, "but I'm warning you. I'm terrible at fun now. I've forgotten how to do anything that doesn't involve a spreadsheet." "Good thing I'm an excellent teacher," Carter said, linking her arm through mine. "Come on, we're going to fix you." As we walked toward the parking lot, I couldn't help but notice how Carter had changed and stayed exactly the same all at once. She was still the girl who made terrible jokes and wore her heart on her sleeve. But there was something different about her. A confidence, maybe. Or just the ease of someone who'd figured out how to be happy without needing to prove anything to anyone. I'd spent 10 years running toward something. Maybe it was time to figure out what I'd been running from. Carter's car was a disaster. A beautiful, chaotic disaster. A 2008 Honda Civic with a cracked windshield, a bumper sticker that said, "I'd rather be reading," and what appeared to be an entire ecosystem of coffee cups living in the cup holders. "Don't judge," Carter said, kicking aside a pile of magazines to make room for my luggage. "I've been meaning to clean this out since, 2019. "This is a biohazard," I said, but I was smiling. "How are you even alive?" "Sheer willpower and denial," Carter replied, pulling out of the parking lot. "Also, I want you to know that I'm taking the scenic route home. Your mother said you'd probably want to go straight to the hospital, but I'm betting you need a decompression period first." She was right, and I hated that she was right. "How did you know that?" "Because I know you, Alice. I know that you're probably freaking out about your dad and your mom and the fact that you're back in the town you swore you'd never return to. So we're going to drive around, we're going to get terrible food, and we're going to talk about literally anything except your job or your father's health." "That's a lot of things to avoid," I said. "Then we'll talk about me instead," Carter said cheerfully. "I'm very interesting. Did you know I'm a librarian now?" I actually hadn't known that. I realized with a sharp pang of guilt that I didn't know much about Carter's life at all. We'd exchanged Christmas cards for the first few years, and then even that had stopped. I'd been so focused on building my career that I'd let one of the most important people in my life fade into the background. "Tell me everything," I said, and she did. Carter had stayed in Millbrook after high school. She'd gone to the University of Connecticut, gotten her degree in library science, and came back to run the Millbrook Public Library, the same library where we'd spent countless afternoons hiding from the world in the young adult section. "It's not glamorous," Carter said, turning onto the highway. "I'm not making 6 figures or anything, but I love it. I get to help people find books that change their lives. I get to plan community events. Last month, I organized a murder mystery night that was absolutely chaotic and amazing." "That sounds nice," I said, and I meant it. "It is nice," Carter agreed. "But I want to hear about you. Tell me about New York. Tell me about the fancy job and the fancy apartment and the fancy life." So I did. I told her about the corner office on the 42nd floor, about the deals I'd closed, about the time I negotiated a contract that saved the company $3 million. I told her about the networking events and the power lunches and the feeling of being exactly where I was supposed to be. And as I talked, I realized how hollow it all sounded. "But are you happy?" Carter asked quietly. The question caught me off guard. Of course I'm happy. I worked incredibly hard to get where I am. "That's not what I asked," Carter said. "I asked if you're happy. Not if you're successful. Not if you're impressive. Happy." I opened my mouth to answer, and then closed it again. Because the truth was, I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt genuinely happy. I felt accomplished. I felt validated. I felt like I was winning at life. But happy? That was a different thing entirely. I don't know, I admitted. Carter reached over and squeezed my hand. Well, that's what this week is for. We're going to figure it out. We ended up at Rosie's Diner, the same place where we'd spent countless Friday nights in high school, eating milkshakes and complaining about our lives. The booths were still red vinyl, the jukebox still played songs from the 1950s, and the waitress, a woman named Diane who'd been there since before we were born, still remembered our usual order. "Alice Chen!" Diane exclaimed when she saw me. "Oh my God, look at you. You're so fancy now. Carter, doesn't she look fancy?" "So fancy," Carter agreed, winking at me. "I'm not fancy," I protested, but I was already laughing. "I'm the same person I was 10 years ago." "You're definitely not," Carter said, studying me. "But maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe you just need to remember who you were before you became so determined to be someone else." As we ate our milkshakes and shared a plate of fries, I found myself relaxing in a way I hadn't in years. There was no performance here, no need to be impressive or successful or perfect. Carter didn't care about my job title or my salary. She just cared about me. And somewhere between the terrible jokes and the shared laughter, I started to remember why I'd loved this girl so much in the first place. My father looked smaller in the hospital bed than I remembered. He'd always been this larger-than-life figure in my mind. The man who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd helped me with my calculus homework, who'd driven me to the airport 10 years ago with tears in his eyes because he knew I was never coming back. But lying there in the cardiac unit at Millbrook General, with tubes running out of his arms and monitors beeping steadily, he looked fragile, human, mortal. "Peanut," he said when he saw me, using the nickname he'd called me since I was 5. "You came home." "Of course I came home," I said, sitting down carefully on the edge of his bed. "Where else would I be?" "New York," he said, "where you belong." "I'm here now," I said, and I squeezed his hand. My mother was in the corner, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. Carter had driven me straight to the hospital from the diner, and I was grateful for it. I needed to see my parents, needed to know that my father was going to be okay. The doctor said he would be. The heart attack had been minor, caught early. With medication and lifestyle changes, he'd be fine. But it was a wake-up call, they said. A reminder that life was fragile, that time was precious, that the things we put off until tomorrow might never come. "I'm so glad you're here," my mother said, pulling me into a hug that smelled like hospital soap and desperation. "I was so worried you wouldn't come." "I'm here," I said. "I'm staying for a week." "A week?" My father looked disappointed. "That's not very long." "It's what I could get off work," I said. But even as I said it, I knew it was a lie. I could have taken longer. I could have taken a month. But I'd been so focused on getting back to New York, on proving that my life there was more important than my life here, that I'd limited myself to the bare minimum. Carter appeared in the doorway with 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might need these," she said, handing one to my mother and one to me. "You're a lifesaver," my mother said, and I watched as Carter smiled at her with genuine warmth. It was clear that they'd gotten close over the years, that Carter had been here for my family in ways I hadn't. The guilt of that hit me like a physical blow. "I'm going to step outside and give you guys some privacy," Carter said, but my father reached out and grabbed her hand. "Stay," he said. "You're family too." And just like that, Carter pulled up a chair and sat down, and the 4 of us talked for hours. We talked about my father's health, about my mother's job at the school, about the changes in Millbrook. We talked about the new coffee shop that had opened downtown, about the community theater production Carter had helped coordinate, about the expansion plans for the library. And I realized, listening to them talk about their lives, that I'd been so focused on what I'd left behind that I'd never stopped to consider what I'd missed. Carter had built a life here, a real, meaningful life. She had friends and community and purpose. She had people who loved her and depended on her. She had roots. And I had a corner office and a 401k. "Tell us about New York," my mother said. "Tell us about your job." So I did. I told them about the deals and the promotions and the success. But this time, I also told them about the loneliness, about the nights I worked until midnight and came home to an empty apartment, about the friendships I'd let fade because I was too busy climbing the ladder, about the feeling of winning at a game I'd never actually wanted to play. "You can always come home," my father said quietly. "I know," I said. But I didn't know if I could. I didn't know if I was brave enough to admit that I'd made a mistake, that I'd spent 10 years running toward something that didn't actually make me happy. That night, after we left the hospital, Carter drove me to my parents' house. The old Victorian on Maple Street, with the wraparound porch and the garden my mother had been tending for 30 years. "Do you want to come in?" I asked. "Can't," Carter said. "I have to open the library tomorrow morning, but I'll pick you up at 10, okay? We're going to have breakfast, and then I'm going to show you what Millbrook has become." "It's still a small town," I said. "It is," Carter agreed, "but it's our small town. And sometimes, that's enough." After she left, I sat on the porch swing, the same swing where Carter and I had sat countless times, talking about our dreams and our fears, and I let myself cry. Not the polite, controlled crying I did in my office when things got overwhelming. Real crying. The kind that comes from deep inside and shakes your whole body, because I was starting to understand that I'd been running from the wrong thing. I hadn't been running from Millbrook. I'd been running from myself. The next morning, Carter picked me up at exactly 10 a.m. and we went to a new cafe called The Daily Grind. It was the kind of place that would have been impossible in Millbrook 10 years ago. Artisanal coffee, locally sourced pastries, free Wi-Fi, and a vibe that felt distinctly urban. "See?" Carter said, gesturing around. "We're not completely stuck in the past." "This is nice," I admitted. "When did this open?" "About 3 years ago," Carter said. "The owner is this woman named Priya, who moved here from Hartford. She wanted to create a space where people could work, create, and connect. It's become kind of the hub of the community." We sat in the corner, and Carter pulled out her phone to show me photos from the library's events. There were pictures of book clubs and author readings, of children's story time and teen gaming nights. There were photos of Carter surrounded by people who clearly adored her, people who depended on her, people whose lives she'd touched. "You're really good at this," I said, scrolling through the images. "I love it," Carter said simply. "I know it's not impressive by New York standards, but it matters. It matters to the people here." "It matters to me," I said, and I meant it. We spent the day exploring Millbrook. Carter showed me the renovated downtown, the new community center, the park that had been expanded. She introduced me to people she knew, the barista who'd gone to our high school, the woman who ran the bookstore, the man who owned the new restaurant. And everywhere we went, people lit up when they saw Carter. They asked about her. They hugged her. They thanked her for something she'd done for them. It was clear that she'd become an integral part of this community, that her life here was full and meaningful and real. By contrast, I realized that in 10 years in New York, I couldn't name more than 5 people who would genuinely miss me if I disappeared. My colleagues would find a replacement. My clients would move on. My apartment would be rented to someone else. But Carter? Carter was woven into the fabric of this town. That evening, we ended up back at the diner. Diane had saved our favorite booth, and we ordered the same thing we'd ordered 1,000 times before: milkshakes and fries. "I need to tell you something," Carter said, stirring her milkshake with her straw. "And I need you to promise you'll listen without interrupting." "Okay," I said slowly. "I've been in love with you since senior year," Carter said, not looking at me. "And I know that's probably weird. And I know you're probably going to freak out. But I needed you to know. Because you're here now, and you're looking at your life like you're seeing it for the first time. And I need you to know that there's another option. There's a life here. There's a life with me, if you want it." I couldn't breathe. I literally could not breathe. "Carter, I know you're going back to New York," she continued. "I know you have a whole life there, but I also know that you're miserable. And I know that you've been miserable for a long time. So I'm putting it out there. If you ever decide that you want something different, I'm here." "You can't just say something like that," I said, my voice shaking. "You can't just upend my entire understanding of our relationship." "Why not?" Carter finally looked at me, and her eyes were so honest, so vulnerable, that I felt my heart crack open. "Life's too short to keep secrets. Your dad proved that." "I don't know what to say," I whispered. "You don't have to say anything," Carter said. "I just needed you to know." We sat in silence for a long moment, and then I started laughing. Not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. Because of course Carter was in love with me. Of course the one person who'd always understood me, who'd always been there for me, who'd always made me feel like myself, was the person I'd been running from. "I'm terrified," I said. "I know," Carter said. "I don't know if I can be what you need," I continued. "I don't know if I can stay here. I don't know if I can give up my career." "I'm not asking you to give up anything," Carter said. "I'm just asking you to consider that there might be more than one way to live a good life. That success might look different than you thought. That maybe the thing you've been looking for has been here all along." I spent the next 3 days in a daze. I went to the hospital and sat with my father while he recovered. I helped my mother with housework. I went to the library and watched Carter work. Watched how she interacted with patrons. How she created spaces where people felt seen and valued. And I thought about my life in New York. About the corner office and the 6-figure salary and the empty apartment. About the promotions I'd chased, and the relationships I'd sacrificed, and the version of myself I'd become. Ambitious and successful, and completely, utterly alone. On my last day in Millbrook, I called my boss. "I need to talk to you about something," I said. "Of course," he said. "What's going on?" "I'm resigning," I said. "Effective immediately." There was a long pause. "Alice, I think you need to take some time to process what's happening with your father." "I've had 10 years to process," I interrupted, "and I've realized that I've been chasing the wrong thing. I'm done." After I hung up, I felt lighter than I had in years. I drove to the library and found Carter shelving books in the young adult section, the same section where we'd spent so many afternoons as teenagers. "Hi," I said. "Hi," Carter said, turning around. She looked nervous, like she was afraid I was going to tell her that I was leaving, that I couldn't do this. "I quit my job," I said. "Oh God," Carter said. "Alice, you didn't have to." "I did," I said, "because I realized something. I realized that I've been so focused on running away from this place, from you, from myself, that I forgot to actually live. And I don't want to do that anymore. What are you saying? Carter asked, stepping closer. I'm saying that I want to try, I said. I'm saying that I'm terrified and I have no idea what I'm doing, but I want to try. With you. Here, in Millbrook. Carter's face broke into the biggest smile I'd ever seen. Yeah? Yeah, I said. But I'm warning you. I'm going to be a disaster. I'm going to have moments where I regret this decision. I'm going to struggle with not having a 5-year plan. I know, Carter said, pulling me close. But you won't be a disaster alone. You'll have me. And as she kissed me, right there in the young adult section of the Millbrook Public Library, surrounded by books and possibility, I realized that I'd finally found what I'd been looking for all along. It wasn't in New York. It wasn't in a corner office or a 6-figure salary. It was here, in this small town, with this woman who'd always believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. Over the next few months, I found a job at a nonprofit in Hartford that paid less than half of what I'd made in New York, but gave me the kind of fulfillment I'd never experienced in finance. I moved into Carter's apartment, a charming 2-bedroom above the bookstore downtown. I joined the community theater. I started volunteering at the library, and I was happy. Genuinely, deeply, authentically happy. My father recovered fully. My mother stopped worrying about me. And Carter and I built a life together that was small and quiet and absolutely perfect. On our 1-year anniversary, Carter took me back to the airport. Not to leave, but to pick up my parents, who were coming to visit. As we drove, she reached over and squeezed my hand. Do you regret it? She asked. Coming back? Not for a second, I said. This is exactly where I'm supposed to be. And I meant it with every fiber of my being. Thank you so much for listening to Alice and Carter's story all the way to the end. I hope it reminded you of something important, that success isn't always measured in salary or job titles. Sometimes, the greatest achievement is finding the courage to choose love, community, and authenticity over ambition. Here's my advice for you. Don't wait for a health scare or a moment of crisis to reassess your life. Take time now to ask yourself if you're truly happy or if you're just running on a treadmill. And if you find that you're running from something, have the courage to turn around and face it. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel. Your support means everything to us and helps us continue creating stories that touch hearts and change lives. And remember, wherever you are in the world, you are never too far from home. May God bless you abundantly. Take care.